I am Rachel Humphrey with It's Personal Stories, a hospitality podcast, and we are delighted to be joined today by Thomas Penny, the president of Donohoe Hospitality. Thomas, welcome to the program. I'm excited to jump right in.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to it.
Thomas, anyone who listens regularly knows that one of the things I really love about the hospitality industry is that you can carve any journey, any career path you want. It does not need to mimic anybody else's and still achieve an incredible level of success in the industry. So tell us a little bit about your journey, where you got your start with things and how they led to where you are today.
I could not agree more. Our industry is an industry of hope, and my journey is a manifestation of that hope. I started in the hotel business in January 1992 as a dishwasher, making $4.50 an hour. It was my senior year of high school, needed some money to pay the car insurance, and took a job at a hotel. Graduated high school, and towards the end of the year, my brother, only brother, said he wanted to take me out to celebrate me turning 18 and being focused in his mind. And so we were out having a good time. I had to work at the hotel the next morning, so I said, "Hey, look, I'll meet you at Mom's and Pop's house, and we'll catch up there." I leave around 11:30, get home around 12 o'clock. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock at the door. And my parents and I, we get up and we run to the door. And lo and behold, there were two state police officers coming to tell us that my only brother, only sibling, 2 years my senior, had been killed in a car accident. So it was absolutely devastating, probably the darkest point of my life. But I can remember a few days later, my father saying, "Son, I need you to deliver remarks at your brother's funeral. You knew him best." And I had never spoken publicly before that point. And I just remember walking to the front of the funeral home and kneeling down next to his gray casket and saying everything I do going forward was to make him proud, and challenging all my family and friends that were present to do better, and to do better as a tribute to my brother. And so 2 weeks later, I returned to work, really connected to, as King would describe, the fierce urgency of now. And, over the course of the next 18 months, I went from washing dishes to driving a hotel van to working as a restaurant supervisor, a restaurant manager, on to food and beverage director, where I was running a nightclub, an event space, and a restaurant when I couldn't consume alcohol myself. And did that job for another 18 months. Decided to bring my talent to Donohoe. I applied for a position at our largest downtown DC hotel, and was hired into a food and beverage manager's position. And over the course of 21 years, worked my way up through the food and beverage vertical, then became a general manager, ran one of our Marriott's downtown DC. And in 2017, we were in the process of selling that hotel, and was offered a senior leadership role with one of our competitors. And the Donohoe folks decided that I was a part of the future plans of the organization, and offered me an opportunity I couldn't refuse. And that was roughly a little bit over 9 years ago, where I was offered the opportunity to lead the hotel company as president. And what a great opportunity. Over the last 9 years, we've expanded outside of the DC, Maryland, Virginia area into Baltimore, Charlottesville, and Las Vegas. And we have grown significantly the size of our portfolio, with significant opportunities in the pipeline. And just to bring it full circle, when I went back to that first Donohoe hotel that I had started at, when I went back as president, there were a sea of room attendants and servers there who were emotional because they felt that they had guided the career of the president of the company. And they absolutely did that. They were an extraordinary group of hospitality professionals. And when I joined Donohoe, I was 21 years old, and many of them taught me the business. And now I'm fortunate enough to lead the organization and to grow the company and to create opportunities for them.
Wow. I mean, so many incredible lessons in there. I actually remember when you and I shared a stage recently and you told the story about the evening out with your brother and how impactful that is. I appreciate you sharing it here. And what a strong message to know at such a young age that you wanted to lead with purpose and to see you continuing to do that. If we talk a little bit about those couple decades at Donohoe, for an industry, it seems like it's one under the other. We have people who switch companies every year or people who will be lifers where they are. As you have had different roles at Donohoe, what are some of the leadership lessons, maybe from different segments that you have taken with you? How does that leadership evolve? And then how do you make sure that you are staying fresh and relevant at a company that you've been associated with for a long time?
So the first thing I would say from a Donahoe perspective, there are parallels between Donahoe and the Marriott family story. As a matter of fact, our headquarters is almost directly across the street from Marriott. And, uh, and I would just say that Bill Marriott used to say that if you take care of the associates, they'll take care of the guests and the guests will come back. That's been a truism because at various points in my leadership journey with Donahoe, there were times where there were other leaders in the business with more tenure that were up for promotions that I wanted. And there were these critical points where the associates leaned forward on my behalf and said, "We hear that this person's going to be promoted, but we believe it's Thomas's time."
Hmm.
And they advocated for me just because I was a listening leader and a supportive leader. And again, as a young manager, it made a significant difference in the organization just by way of them advocating at a critical time. So the first thing is just the importance of us being in the people business. And before we can look to provide an extraordinary experience for guests, we got to take care of the people that are in our business that really make the magic happen. And so I think that's been foundational to my tenure with Donahoe. There's a quote on the wall here at our corporate office that basically says it's from Dick Donohoe, and I'm just paraphrasing, but he basically says, relationships are foundational to success, and in order to continue to grow the business, it all starts with relationships, customer relationships, and associate relationships, and that's proven to be true for me.
Well, what a powerful message, too, to have your colleagues advocating for you in that rise for leadership as a testament to the relationship building, but also how you're treating others around you. You mentioned earlier when you were talking about your
Can I go
story.
back and just add
Yeah,
one thing?
of course.
So I also believe one of the tremendous benefits of this business, being in this business, is the opportunity to travel the world without leaving the workplace. And when I joined Donahoe 30 years ago, we had employees from 36 different countries working at my first hotel. What a tremendous experience for me. And over the years, I've always prided myself in learning some of the native tongue of the people who I have the privilege of working alongside. And as a result, I speak bits and pieces of 9 different languages just because I've tried to develop a personal, relationship with our employees through their native language. And again, it's been a great journey for me just to be able to travel the world without leaving the workplace, experience different food from all over the world, and just learn about the history of different countries. It's been incredibly rewarding.
Well, and what a great leadership lesson that you're looking to do that to connect with your team, but not looking for anything in return as a very authentic method of leadership. So I know I love that.
And they like to see me make mistakes. And when I'm trying to learn their language and I may not pronounce it 100% correct, they can correct me, and so they enjoy correcting me.
Well, maybe if we have time at the end, I'm going to ask you the fun fact of what those 9 languages are. But when it comes to public speaking, you mentioned that when you spoke at your brother's service, that was really the first time you had done any public speaking. You and I are both big believers in representation on our stages, how critically important that is for the industry, but also that public speaking is a really important path for each one of us in our leadership journey from a visibility standpoint, being seen as a subject matter expert, all of these things. Talk a little bit about your public speaking journey. Are you comfortable with it? How do you prepare for it? And when you're talking about representation on stages, how does that impact, if it does, your places you say yes to or opportunities maybe that you seek out?
So one, I would say, in Kobe, I'm a student of sports professionals that have an intense commitment to working hard. And Kobe would oftentimes say that you've got to make mistakes in order to get it right. And so in the early days of my public speaking journey, it was incredibly difficult in the early years. As a matter of fact, I can remember in 2006, Donohoe was named Employer of the Year by the Burgess Marriott Foundation, which is an organization that the Marriott family started. And so the annual gala was at a large convention hotel in DC, and there was over 1,000 people there. And I had to basically deliver remarks expressing gratitude for the award. And needless to say, I gave an authentic message that was well received, but it was difficult because I had not had that kind of experience speaking in front of such a large crowd. But the more you do it, the better you get at it. And I think authenticity is important. Preparation is important in terms of understanding the key points that you want to touch on. And then as it relates to your question around the decision as to where to speak and where not to speak, we find ourselves at a unique time in the history of the country and arguably the world where there's a lot of division happening. And so I'm always looking for settings that's going to allow for me to bring people together and to talk about how our industry is uniquely positioned to do just that. And clearly making certain that women and diverse members of our hotel teams can have a chance to see themselves in leadership and ownership positions in our industry. That's really, really important to me. And that goes back to a point some years ago when I was trying to convince my daughter that she should consider working in our business. And I had her to do some research on a company that at the time I thought did just a phenomenal job. And so she had spent a few days doing this research, and she comes back to me. She said, "Daddy, I'm ready to talk about it." I said, "So tell me your thoughts on this organization." She said, "Dad, I can never work for them." And I said, "Why? You know, they do this right. They have great hotels. Guest experience is some of the best in the business. What do you mean?" She said, "I went to the senior leadership pages, and I didn't see any women." And she said, "How can I give 30 years, 40 years to a company? And if they don't have me as a part of the leadership structure, that doesn't give me confidence that they will do so in the future." And she was probably about 14 years old when she made that observation. And so I have always been a proponent of making certain that folks are represented in the boardroom as well as the break room. And that sometimes will influence where I lend my voice.
Well, that's a perfect segue, actually, because one of the things I wanted to talk about was representation on your leadership team. And maybe that's driven by your daughter being in your head at such a young age. But the Donohoe leadership team is very representative. And I'm curious, you used the words in talking about public speaking, authenticity, preparation, intentionality in terms of where you're speaking. I'm wondering if those are words you'd also apply to creating a leadership team, elevating and supporting a leadership team. And how does your business and your people benefit from what to you is an important aspect of your leadership?
So I would say clearly we're in the business of hiring and developing the best talent. And and we have been fortunate to attract a diverse group of leaders to lead our organization. I'd say a large percentage of them grew up in our business and grew within it, but we've also attracted talent to our business. It is very important that we ensure that folks can compete for opportunities. Folks of diverse background can compete for opportunities, but they have to earn the job, and that's it's most important that we hire the best talent. And we've just been fortunate to hire individuals that are incredibly thoughtful and experienced in the business, but also represent our associate base. And when I go to our hotels and I have people referencing that as something that's important to them, and how much they enjoy working for the company because they see themselves within the leadership structure, that's something that our employees hold to high regard, and we're fortunate again to attract and retain the talent that we have.
Well, I think one of the important messages in there is that quality and a diverse leadership team go hand in hand. You're not talking about substituting quality of candidates or leadership to do that. So I appreciate you sharing that. When you and I were speaking a while back, Thomas, you mentioned to me that you feel personally a deep responsibility for shaping the future, the next generation of hospitality industry leaders. Talk a little bit about where that comes from, and then how can each of us do our part to reflect that same commitment?
So I appreciate this question so much. One, I'm Thomas Penny III. I'm named after my grandfather. And I recall a time early in my career when I was in my early 20s, my grandfather asked me the question, what did I have going on? And I thought that he wanted to know more about what I was doing professionally. And he asked the question 3 different times, and I was trying to answer the question, but to no avail. And then he said, son, I don't want to know what you're doing. I want to know who you're helping. And so I would say that he significantly planted the seed that ultimately success in this life is about what we do for others. And then I've been fortunate from the time I joined Donohoe. My first boss was Dick, one of Dick Marriott's good friends, and someone who played racquetball with Dick Marriott, and a guy by the name of Gene Flick, who was also a part of the senior leadership team at Hot Shops in the early days of the Hot Shops restaurants that the Marriott family had. And having spent some time with Dick Marriott over the years, and now he's well into his 80s. But when I see him, we're still spending time talking about getting people, particularly young people, connected to our business. And he very much cares about high school students, and then he cares about university students coming into our business. So we spend a lot of time in those areas trying to make sure that there's intentionality in supporting programs that are bringing people into our business. I think I shared when we were together, we being the hotel industry, at least in the DC area, we had agreed to open a high school, a charter high school, back in the late 90s when we were trying to build a convention center. And we made the commitment to open the high school because the community members did not support giving up 6 city blocks so that we could build a convention center. And the only way we were able to get them to agree to do that is by agreeing to start a high school for the purposes of preparing young people in that community for the positions at the convention center. And we operated that school for 15 years, and we have since went back to a partnership with DC Public Schools, where today we have academies of hospitality and tourism at 6 different high schools in DC. And I've worked with the Marriott family on that program. These are NAF academies, and we've also worked together at Howard as well as the University of Utah, basically creating hospitality programs at the university level. So, I really believe that the closer I get towards the end of my career, the memories that are most important to me are just thinking back and reflecting on, the folks that have been able to come up underneath me, and then the folks that we've been able to bring into the business in different ways, either high schools, colleges, or workforce programming.
Do you think, I imagine it does, that your career trajectory, starting as a dishwasher and now being president of Donohoe, is something that is relatable to the kids in the community, where you're talking as someone who started at the entry level, but showing what the industry can do for your path forward?
Without question. I think for them to, sometimes folks will think that your first day on the job, you were wearing a suit and tie. And for them to hear that I was in the dish room, far from a suit and tie, they can find some inspiration in that story. And more importantly, hard work works. And I think my story is the manifestation of working incredibly hard and being privileged to work with some leaders that were great mentors and sponsors over the years. I think there's a great deal to take from my story professionally in terms of what our industry can do, but there's also some inspiration to take from it at a time when, again, there's a lot of divisiveness in the world, and many of the folks who extended opportunities to me over the years, they didn't come from the communities I came from, nor they look like me. They just saw a young man that was committed to working hard and learning quickly, and they created the space for me to do those things.
Such an important lesson. Thomas, you spoke earlier about a few of the ways that you've had some adversity in your career. And one of the things we hear from so many of our industry's leaders is that overcoming challenges, obstacles, adversity often shapes them in a more impactful way than their successes or their celebrations do. Talk a little bit about what you would tell rising leaders in the industry today who may feel like the adversity or the challenges are really becoming sticking points for them, or that they're losing hope because of them.
I would tell them to embrace adversity. As a matter of fact, I've told my kids and I tell young people all the time, adversity is a gift, especially if you get the experience to overcome adversity early in your early years. As a matter of fact, for me, I can say that if it were not for my brother's passing and just the pain that came as a result of that, I likely would not be where I am now. And so I'm someone who will stress the importance of just embracing the adversity. On the other side of pain is progress, and you just can't stop. And as a matter of fact, from a work perspective, at the height of the pandemic, when folks were staying at home, I continued to come into the office because I understand adversity, and I want to make certain that I continue to fight forward and to work through it. And I wanted to show some leadership at a critical time when there was not much going on. And I wanted to send a message to our team that if I was expecting them to come into hotels that were uncontrolled, at
Right.
least I can come into a controlled office and work from a controlled office.
I love the phrase adversity is a gift, and such an important way of looking at that. I recently moderated a panel, and before it started, somebody said to me, please do not talk about AI. We've got too many conversations, important part of the industry, certainly. But I'm going to not listen to that advice on this interview because I am fascinated. You have a really unique perspective on using AI as a tool for shattering barriers in a career development way. Talk a little bit about that for you and what you see happening, or the ways that can be a tool for something that is such an important part of the future of the industry.
So throughout my journey, there were folks that had more experience than I had. There were folks that had, I would say, even greater knowledge in a particular area. They had more knowledge and more experience than I had. The one thing they lacked was confidence. And especially for our immigrant associate base, the lack of confidence could have been rooted in just communication skills, verbally or written. And they did not apply for promotions because they didn't see the possibility of being able to perform the work. And what we have seen, I'd say in the last 12 to 15 months, I've seen incredibly talented leaders in our business really embrace AI. And now they're performing at a much, much higher level. I would say one of the leaders, senior leaders in our business that I'm most excited about has had great experience working for numerous brands. But the way she has embraced technology now allows for me to see her as a potential vice president, senior vice president, and having a future well beyond what I would have thought 15 or 18 months ago. So I think AI has the ability to provide confidence to allow for folks to be able to cross-reference anything that they're writing to make sure that it's grammatically correct, and also just learn from the structure of sentences that they may get from AI to basically be able to, again, expand their knowledge base and confidence and communication, both verbal and written.
That's great advice. I think one of the things we're also seeing is that for recruiters doing senior level placement, they are using a working knowledge, if you will, or embracing of AI as an asset in moving candidates forward, recognizing what a critical part of future leadership it's going to be. So I think that's a great way to start now, so that as those opportunities become available, you're both well versed in it, but you're also getting the benefit of it.
And I have to say that I was not someone in the early days of it coming on the scene that embraced it. I thought that it was that you were cheating to be able to gain access to it and be able to efficiently get work done. But I was touring Steve Ballmer through high school here in DC, current owner of Los Angeles Clippers and former executive at Microsoft. And he asked the young people how many of them were using AI. Needless to say, probably 50% of them raised their hands. The other 50% may have been embarrassed to say that they were using it in front of their teachers. And he said, basically, if you don't use it at some point in the future, you may be unemployable.
Yeah.
And needless to say, I know some of the things that he's been able to do. When I heard him say it in such a passionate way, it changed my outlook on using it. And I've been advocating that folks throughout our organization use it.
Well, when I was in college, my roommate's father bought her a plane ticket using back then Prodigy, the World Wide Web.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was a travel agent. And I famously said, no one will ever use the internet to buy airline tickets or book hotel rooms. So no one is, I am now not going to make that mistake a second time around as to what will last and what will not. But I want to turn to a bit of a quick fire round here. Some of the things that I love about these interviews is, as I've mentioned to you, people I've known for a long time, there are still so many things I get to learn. And then people I don't know as well, like you, I get to learn about you while everybody else is listening too. But you are very well known in the hospitality industry, and you've been at Donohoe for a long time with a lot of the same colleagues. Tell me one thing people don't know about you or would surprise them, or maybe a misperception that you've heard and it surprises you that that's what people think about you.
So one thing that folks might just not know is that, like, I absolutely love history. I read a great deal of history books. I listen to famous speeches given hundreds of years ago. And so I am a student of history. So that's one thing folks might not know.
I love that.
I'd say the other thing folks might not know about me, one, I'm a pescatarian. I'm
For how
fortunate.
long?
Now, so I was a vegan for 2 or 3 years, and then became a pescatarian about, 4 or so years ago. But my wife, she's 8 years older than me, and she looks like she's 20 years younger than me. So I'm trying to catch up, and so
Okay.
I've changed my eating habits.
I love that. Tell me what you are most optimistic about right now.
I'm most optimistic about our business, and I'm most optimistic about our business just because of our people. When I joined Donohoe 30 years ago, I'd grown up here in DC, and most of the folks in my community look like me. And I referenced earlier how I found myself with folks from all over the world. They may come from 35 or 36 different countries, but when we find ourselves in a hotel working alongside each other, we become one family. And so at a time when there's much happening in the world, I'm incredibly optimistic that just by way of what I've lived through in terms of the relationships I've forged with people from all over the world, that if I was able to forge relationships with such a diverse group of associates, I think we'll get to a better place in the future. So I'm optimistic about that.
I think this industry is such a unique and special showcase for that as well. One of the reasons I love this question about advice to our younger selves is I do believe deeply that we are all works in progress and that we continue to evolve. But one of the ways we do is by reflecting on our past and ourselves. As you think back to that 18-year-old boy in Maryland, in DC, what would you tell yourself either about how things have worked out for you or maybe something that would have made the path different or easier for you?
I wish I would have told myself at the age of, say, 20 years old that there's a whole new plethora of opportunities exist in our business. So in the early years, I used to think that if I could just get to being a general manager, my life would be great. And I never knew about the ownership positions, the executive positions at the brand levels within the REITs. I never knew any of those opportunities existed. If I was talking to my younger self, I would have said, "Hey, look, there are these opportunities that are within reach in this industry that you should aggressively pursue." And I really didn't become familiar with those opportunities probably till I was about 30 years old. And I would say that if I was aware of those opportunities when I was 20, I'd be further along at this point. So just being aware of the kind of opportunities exist in this business, if I had known then what I know now, it would have made a world of difference.
And such an important part of how we message our industry and what those opportunities are. Because I think you're right, as so many people begin their career, whatever aspect of this industry or another, there's just a real lack of knowledge about those opportunities that exist. Well, Thomas, we are wrapping up on time, but you've shared a lot of your leadership insights, a lot of inspiring words. What is one thing, thinking about our motto of empowering personal success, that you would leave our audience with?
I would just encourage folks to commit themselves to obviously continuing to read and be curious, and also continuing to just build relationships with folks inside the industry, outside the industry. Whether I'm on an airplane or on a train, I'm curious about people, and I want to learn about folks in other industries and the challenges that they're being confronted with and how they're uniquely trying to solve those challenges. So I would just tell folks to remain curious, to get up early. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 days a week, and 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 days a week. And get up early is important. I get in the office between 5 and 5:30. I like to be the first to turn the lights on. And so I would just say to folks, make the most of the time that you have. And that starts with getting up early and going at it.
That's great advice. I am incredibly appreciative that you said yes to visiting with me today. Appreciative that you shared so much great insight with us. To our audience, we know you have a lot of ways you can choose to spend your time, so we appreciate you joining us, and you can head over to itspersonalstories.com to hear from other industry leaders sharing their personal journeys and their leadership as well. But Thomas, thank you so much for all you do for the industry, for all you do for the next generation of leaders within hospitality. And just mostly, thank you so much for sitting down today and sharing a little bit more about you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun, and I look forward to seeing you at some future industry events.
I'm looking forward to it as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.